In the jagged spine of the Andes, at an altitude where the air grows thin and the world touches the sky, a great empire once thrived. This was the Inca, rulers of a domain that stretched for thousands of miles, home to 10 million people. They built cities of gold, engineered roads through clouds, and administered their vast territory with ruthless efficiency. They achieved all of this in one of the most unforgiving environments on Earth. And they fed their people. They fed their armies. They fed their gods. Not with sprawling, fertile plains, but on the faces of mountains so steep they seemed to defy the very concept of farming. They possessed no iron tools, no wheeled carts, and no large draft animals. Their world was a vertical one, a place of rock, wind, and killing frosts. This presents us with a profound paradox. A civilization of millions, sustained by agriculture, in a place that should have made large-scale farming impossible. It forces us to ask a fundamental question. How did the Inca turn near vertical stone into one of the most productive agricultural landscapes in the ancient world? How did they engineer the mountains themselves to feed an empire? To understand this, we must look not to what they built but to how they thought. For their greatest tool was not made of bronze but of perspective. If you want to learn how humanity solved impossible problems before modern technology, make sure to like this video and subscribe to How It Was Done. Before the Inca Empire carved its image onto the mountains, the Andes were a world of beautiful brutality. This great spine of rock and ice, which rises from the sea to pierce the heavens, dictates all life. Here the sun is a fierce god, its light unfiltered by the thin, cold air. At night the temperature plummets and a crystalline frost descends, capable of shattering the cells of unprotected plants. The seasons are not gentle shifts of color, but a stark duality of torrential rain and parched, wind-scoured dryness. For millennia, human life clung to the pockets of refuge the mountains offered, the fertile, well-watered valleys, ribbons of green carved between colossal stone walls. These valleys were the jewels of the Andes, and they were fiercely contested. Countless cultures rose and fell, their fates tied to these precious slivers of land. Into this world, a new power began to stir. From their sacred city of Cusco, the Inca started a conquest that would astonish the world. Tribe after tribe fell under their dominion. Their armies were disciplined, their administration was methodical, and their ambition seemed limitless. But every victory brought them face to face with an unsolvable equation. Each conquered territory meant more mouths to feed, yet the amount of fertile land remained stubbornly, terrifyingly finite. Their growing empire was a body that was outgrowing its own skeleton. They were caged by the very geography that had forged their hardy character. They could march their armies north and south along the mountain corridors, but they could not create new valleys. The existential threat was not a rival army, but the silent, creeping mathematics of famine. The choice that confronted the Inca leadership was not one of convenience, but of survival. They could cease their expansion, allowing their power to stagnate and inevitably fracture, or they could attempt something that had never been done on such a scale. They had to break free from the horizontal world of the valley floor and embrace the vertical. They had to learn not just to live in the mountains but to rewrite their very surfaces. The alternative was collapse, to become just another footnote in the long history of peoples consumed by the beautiful, unforgiving Andes. To the modern mind, a mountain is an obstacle of rock and earth, a challenge to be conquered, tunneled through, or flown over. But to the Inca, this perception would have been unthinkable. For them, the great snow-capped peaks were not inanimate objects. They were the Apus, powerful living deities who governed the weather, the water, and the fates of all who lived in their shadows. The earth itself was a sacred being, Pachamama, the mother who nourished and sustained. This was not mere superstition. It was the intellectual and spiritual framework that made their entire civilization possible. Their solution to the crisis of famine was therefore not an act of conquest over nature, but a negotiation with the divine. They understood that to ask for the gift of food from Pachamama They must first present her with a worthy offering, and to earn the favor of the Apus, they had to demonstrate a profound and respectful understanding of their sacred bodies. This worldview transformed the nature of the problem. It was no longer a simple engineering challenge of soil and water, but a complex, reverential dialogue. The Inca engineers became the high priests of this conversation. Their tools of measurement were not lasers and sensors, but a deep, multi-generational literacy in the language of the landscape. They read the mountain itself. They possessed a library of knowledge written in stone, sun, and water. For years, they would observe a single slope, watching how the sun traveled across its face from season to season, noting which areas received the morning light and which held the warmth of the afternoon. They learned to read the subtle shifts in rock color and vegetation that signaled the presence of underground springs. They understood the geology of their world with an intimacy that is difficult for us to comprehend, knowing precisely which stone was best for retaining heat, which formations were stable enough to support a wall, and which veins of clay could be used to line an irrigation canal. The mountain was their textbook and the sky was their calendar. This deep reading of their environment allowed them to work with the natural forces at play, not against them. They did not see a barren rocky slope. They saw a canvas of possibilities, a collection of potential microclimates waiting to be unlocked. The Inca meticulously sculpted these mountainsides to create their own favorable growing conditions. Today, we often rely on massive, energy-intensive greenhouses to control the environment for our food. Is there a principle from the Incas' landscape-integrated approach that our modern food systems could learn from? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. To turn this profound understanding of the natural world into a reality that could feed millions required a toolkit of immense power. Yet, if we were to examine the physical tools of an Inca terrace builder, we would be struck by their elegant simplicity. There were no iron shovels or explosives. The primary instrument for breaking the hard mountain soil was the chaki takala, a foot plow made of a sharpened wooden pole with a footrest and handle. Rock was split with stone hammers and bronze crowbars, tools that required a staggering amount of time and brute force. Earth and stone were not moved by carts, for the wheel was not used for transport in the Andes, but carried in woven baskets on the backs of laborers. The sheer contrast between the humility of these tools and the monumental scale of the results is breathtaking. It tells us that the Incas' most powerful instrument was not a physical object. Their greatest invention was a technology of social organization. This system, known as the mita, was the engine that powered the empire. It was a form of labor tax, a mandatory public service that every able-bodied household owed to the state. For a set number of days each year, millions of individuals would be mobilized to work on imperial projects, building roads, raising temples, and, most importantly, constructing the agricultural terraces. The mita was not slavery. It was a deeply ingrained system of civic duty, a rotational and organized draft that allowed the Sapa Inca to focus the collective energy of his people with incredible precision. It was the loom that wove the individual threads of human effort into the grand tapestry of an empire. But this colossal workforce, this human energy, was meaningless without a blueprint. Behind the millions of hands were the minds of the architects, a highly respected class of imperial engineers. These were the men who possessed the accumulated knowledge of generations. They planned the precise gradient of the canals that would carry water for miles without eroding the channel. They understood the complex art of joinery, fitting massive stones together without mortar to create walls that could withstand the seismic tremors of the Andes. They were the conductors of a grand symphony of construction, turning the vision of the empire into a tangible reality, carved into the very bones of the earth. With the minds of the architects to guide them and the power of the mita to fuel their work, the Inca began to remake the world. The transformation of a mountain began not with a shovel, but with a plumb line and a profound sense of geometry. First, an army of workers would lay the foundation, a masterfully engineered retaining wall. The stones were cut with such precision that they fit together perfectly without mortar, a technique that gave the walls the flexibility to withstand earthquakes. Each wall was built with a slight backward incline, channeling the immense pressure of the earth behind it safely downwards. This wall was the skeleton, but the true genius of the Andes, the terraces, lay within. They were not simply filled with dirt. They were complex, layered filtration systems, each terrace a massive planter box designed for perfect drainage and soil health. On the bottom, against the mountainside, the workers would place a thick layer of large, coarse stones. This created a drainage field that prevented water from saturating the soil and collapsing the wall. Above this, they added a layer of smaller gravel and sand, which acted as a filter. And finally, on the very top, came the most precious ingredient: the dark, rich topsoil, often carried in baskets up steep mountain paths from the fertile valley floors below. The terrace was now complete, a sophisticated machine for growing food. But it was just one component in a much larger system. The next step was to give it life. From high mountain springs or the meltwater of glaciers, the Incas' hydraulic engineers diverted water into stone-lined canals. These were the veins of the mountain, masterpieces of gravity-fed engineering that hugged the contours of the land for miles. With carefully calculated gradients, they delivered a steady supply of water to the highest terraces, which then flowed down, level by level, nourishing each one in turn. But water was only half the battle. The true killer in the Andes was the cold, and here the Incas' design revealed its most subtle and brilliant feature. The stone-retaining walls were more than just support. They were thermal batteries. All day, under the intense equatorial sun, the dark stone absorbed and stored heat. When the sun set and the temperature plummeted, the walls would slowly radiate this stored warmth back into the soil, creating a microclimate several degrees warmer than the surrounding air. This gentle heat protected the crop's sensitive roots from the deadly frost. The ultimate expression of this mastery can be seen at Moray. Here, the Inca did not build up the mountain, but sculpted down into the earth, creating a series of stunning concentric terraces that form a giant earthen bowl. The temperature difference between the highest and lowest terrace can be as much as 27 degrees Fahrenheit or 15 degrees Celsius. It is widely believed that Moray was a great agricultural laboratory, a place where the Inca tested crops and acclimatized seeds, using the different terraces to perfectly simulate the conditions at various altitudes throughout their vast empire. This great machine of stone and soil, powered by water and human will, did more than just work. It produced a miracle. The barren, vertical slopes, once home only to rock and hardy grasses, were transformed into cascading gardens of vibrant green. From these terraces came a bounty that would not only sustain the empire, but would fuel its meteoric rise. They harvested hundreds of varieties of potato, a crop for every altitude and soil type. They grew quinoa, the mother grain of the Andes, and maize, which was not only a food staple but a sacred crop used in religious ceremonies. This was not the meager harvest of subsistence farmers. This was a calculated, state-managed surplus, a form of wealth more valuable than any metal. This abundance became the currency of power, the fuel for conquest and consolidation. But a surplus is only valuable if it can be preserved. In a world without refrigeration, a bumper crop could quickly turn to rot. The Inca solved this problem with an invention born from the unique conditions of their environment, a masterpiece of food preservation called chuño. At night, they would spread small potatoes on the ground to face the hard, dry frost of the high Andes. The freezing temperatures would rupture the potatoes' cell walls. In the morning sun, as the potatoes thawed, communities would trample them underfoot, squeezing out the water. This process was repeated for several nights and days, a natural freeze-drying cycle that removed almost all moisture. The result was a small, light, and incredibly durable food source. Chuño could be stored for years, even decades, without spoiling, an ironclad insurance policy against drought, crop failure, and the uncertainties of war. This food security was the bedrock of the Inca state. With granaries full of chuño, they could dispatch armies on long campaigns, confident they would not starve. They could support legions of specialized laborers, stonemasons, weavers, metallurgists, who did not farm, but created the splendors of the empire. The majestic walls of Cusco, the enigmatic sanctuary of Machu Picchu, the 25,000-mile network of roads that stitched the empire together, All of it rested on this agricultural foundation. The terraces were the silent, unglamorous engine that powered the golden age of the Inca. They were a testament to a simple truth. Before an empire can reach for the heavens, it must first sink its roots deep into the earth. No creation of humanity, however brilliant, is immortal. The Inca's agricultural system, for all its genius, was a finely tuned machine that required constant attention. It was a delicate pact with a powerful landscape, and its stability depended on several critical factors. The terraces were in a perpetual war with gravity. A single landslide could sever a primary irrigation canal, starving hundreds of terraces below. A retaining wall, if not meticulously maintained, could collapse, spilling its precious soil down the mountain in a single ruinous moment. The system demanded a vigilant, organized, and unending investment of human labor. This was its first fragility. It could not be neglected. The second was its dependence on the very social structure that built it. The entire machine was operated by the engine of the Mita and guided by the authority of the Sapa Inca. It was a top-down, centrally managed system that relied on social cohesion and a shared sense of purpose. If the authority of the emperor were to crumble, or if the social contract of the Mita were to break, the entire system would begin to decay. The canals would clog with silt, the walls would weaken, and the gardens would slowly, inevitably, be reclaimed by the mountain. In 1532, this point of rupture arrived. When Francisco Pizarro and his conquistadors came to the Andes, they brought with them more than just steel and horses. They brought a cataclysm. European diseases like smallpox swept ahead of the armies, wiping out a staggering percentage of the population. This demographic collapse crippled the Mita system, creating a labor shortage from which it would never recover. The Spanish conquest shattered the Incas' political and social order. The emperor was executed, the lines of authority were broken, and the empire was plunged into chaos. But the final, fatal blow was a fundamental clash of worldviews. The Spanish did not see the Andes with the eyes of a farmer. They saw a treasury. To them, the mountains were not sacred apus, but repositories of gold and silver. Their obsession with mineral wealth led them to redirect the sophisticated labor system of the Inca towards the brutal, life-consuming work of the mines. The deep generational knowledge of hydraulic engineering, of soil management, of microclimate farming was discarded. It was a wisdom they did not understand and did not value. The pact with the mountain was broken. And the great machine, starved of the human energy and knowledge that had sustained it, began to fall silent. But the story does not end in ruin. An idea, if it is true enough and strong enough, can outlast the empire that conceived it. While the Inca state was shattered, the terraces themselves remained, scarred and neglected but not destroyed. For centuries, they have clung to the mountainsides, a testament to the brilliance of their design. Their longevity is a quiet rebuke to our own era of planned obsolescence. These structures, built with simple tools and a deep understanding of the earth, have endured for over 500 years, a stark contrast to modern agricultural systems that can exhaust the soil in a few generations. Today, a quiet renaissance is taking place in the Andes. Across the highlands from Peru to Bolivia, communities are looking to the past to secure their future. They are returning to the abandoned terraces, clearing them of overgrowth, and restoring the ancient canals. They are rediscovering that these Andeans are not relics but a living technology. In this era of climate change, the terraces prove to be remarkably resilient, preventing soil erosion, conserving precious water, and protecting crops from unpredictable frosts more effectively than many modern methods. They are a living legacy, a vibrant thread connecting the present day to a deep and sophisticated past. The story of the Inca terraces teaches us a profound lesson about the nature of technology. It shows us that the most powerful solutions are not always born from complex machinery, but from a humble and patient observation of the world. The Inca listened to the mountain. They learned its rhythms, its strengths, and its weaknesses. They did not seek to conquer it, but to enter into a partnership with it, creating a system that was not only productive but sustainable and deeply integrated into the logic of the landscape. It is a lesson written in stone, echoing down to us through the centuries, reminding us that sometimes the most sophisticated path forward is the one that learns from the deep wisdom of the past. To uncover more stories of how humanity achieved the impossible before the modern age, subscribe to How It Was Done.